The 13th of October became the special day in the long story of the Malaysian Boeing's crash in the sky over the Ukrainian Donbass. Right on that day, the Security Council of the Netherlands reported results of the investigation of the MH-17 crash causes. At the same time, the Russian concern MH-17 presented its own investigation results confirmed by the full-scale experiments. Even before the report started, the security representatives explained to the hundreds of journalists how to do. No questions, no video or photo recording was allowed during the report. The journalists were also told that the Council was not going to give a political analysis of the Ukrainian conflict. Anyway, the politics took place since it was contrary to the interests for some figurants of the process, and these were not the Russians. At precisely 1:15 p.m., Tibe Yustra walked over to the stage. Soon after the beginning, the president of the Security Council confirmed that the flight MH17 was shot down by the air defense system bug. At 1:20 p.m., the missile warhead exploded at the left of the cockpit. About 800 elements struck the aircraft. In the result of the explosion, the aircraft body was destroyed right in the air. The wreckage trail was 50 square kilometers. Then Tibe Yustra officially and precisely listed all the crash causes versions, which were discarded by the Commission. An act of terror and technical glitch. There was even a version of collision with a meteorite. As a result, for the first 15 minutes of the Yustra's report, it was clear that the characteristics of the missile that struck the Boeing corresponded to the weapon that is still used by the Ukrainian army, but not the Russian one. It should seem that the conclusions are obvious, and the Security Council of the Netherlands should have checked the Ukrainian bugs if there are any missed, but it was not done. This book I wrote 3 months after the crash, and I understood that the West didn't tell the rest of the story. Joost Niemeller is one of the Dutch experts who can openly charge the Security Council of bias. Having learned the Commission report, he has assured once again that during the course of the investigation, the opinion of the Russians was ignored. The Commission was pressed from outside. They call it a Netherlands investigation, but de facto this is a Ukrainian investigation. The Commission was extremely pressed by Kiev. The most information has come from there. It can be explained by the numerous strange things during the investigation. For example, the Netherlands refused to start evacuating wreckage right away. They started gathering it only 4 months after the crash. Moreover, the last part of wreckage has been taken away only this autumn, and the main part of it is still in the Donbass fields. But the most awful thing is that the crash scene had been bombed by the Ukrainian artillery until the February of 2015. It should seem that by the unhurried process, the Boeing's body should have been reconstructed with an extreme precision, but the Netherlands experts has managed to reconstruct only the cockpit and a part of the business class. Why they were that negligent remains a mystery. Anyway, the ban for journalists asking for any details helped Tibe Yustra more than once. For example, when he said that for more than a year the expert hasn't managed to find out when an exact place the bug missile was launched from. According to the calculations, the missile was launched from the area of 320 square kilometers. There were several simulations conducted by the Dutch, Ukrainian and Russian experts. Although the results of the simulation show a comparatively same geographical area, there should be more investigations to determine an exact place of the launch. Nevertheless, the same day in the Ukraine there were TV news with their own translation of what Yustra said. One of the most popular Ukrainian TV channel, Inter, reported that Tibe Yustra put all blame solely on the Donbass members of People's Volunteer Corps.
Ракету запустили с территории подконтрольной пророссийским боевикам.
Why Inter do that, or who could make them lie to the Ukrainian citizens, is unclear. Thus, it appears that during 16 months of the investigation, the Commission didn't manage to find an answer who pushed the button on the 17th of October in 2014. And it happened in the 21st century, when our planet is almost swept by the spy satellites. On the day of the crash, the United States cried across the world that they had images and intelligence, but these were still not given even to the Commission of the Security Council, what was frankly admitted by its president. It goes without saying that Tibaiustra has tight contacts with different special services, and of course he went to the United States for negotiations with the CIA to ask for the images, but the Americans said that they couldn't show them because they were their secrets of state. It's illogical. There is only one conclusion: this report is contrary to their interests. But what are these interests? Perhaps such kind of investigation can be explained by the fact that the Netherlands are afraid of taking political responsibilities, because if they said that the missile was launched from the Ukrainian territory, then the United States and Europe has been supporting terrorists who stuck in the Kiev's government cabinets. I will never believe the conclusions of the Commission, the Western mass media and politicians. Let the Netherlands scream across the world that I am pro-Russian, that I am a Putinist, but still I didn't see any proof of the Russia's guilt. Max van den Werf has come to Donetsk for the second time. He's trying to understand the circumstances of the tragedy himself, and doing it becomes more and more difficult. But the Dutch journalist promises that soon he will present the results of his own investigation. In his opinion, it is not difficult to determine the place of missile launch. It just takes a wish. Of course, only one bug could shoot, so why do the Commission have three versions? It's just politics. It's clear that there was a reason why they decided not to find any witness. Nevertheless, there was a moment in the Commission's report when they had to put their foot down and to call those who were involved in the tragedy. One fact was obvious: the Ukraine that was responsible for the security of its airspace had not postponed any flight, although Kiev knew that it was deadly dangerous to fly over that region at that moment.
Every single one of those operators thought that it was safe. There was undeniable an armed conflict taking place on the ground, but above 32,000 feet, that is approximately 10 kilometers, the airspace was open to civil aviation. Nobody considered the possibility that civil aircraft at cruising altitude were at risk.
But what are men's lives worth when it comes to big money? After the state upheaval, the Ukraine is deep in debt, and the transit flights brings them up to $200 million a year. But now they have to part with the money, because after the Commission's report, the relatives of the victims have all reasons to demand multi-million compensations from Kiev. The Security Council Commission assured that there was a gross violation of flight safety. Recognition of this fact will help us in the European Court. I believe that this decision what the court was expecting for. And now there's our winning argument number one. I have just called the relatives of the victims, and they are pleased with the report results. On October the 13th, the relatives of 290 victims were gathered in this hotel in the center of Hague. They were the first people who knew the results of the investigation. The most important thing was that the people on MH-17 died almost instantaneously. Now I feel a little bit easier, because we know that none of them was suffering. Missile, explosion, fall. Besides, there were different things reported, as though they were conscious. Now these people are going to have a lot of civil court sessions and wait for months to know who will be answerable for the blood of their loved ones. Because the results of the following investigation of the terrible crash will become known only the next year. At the same time, Russia has some claims to the Netherlands report. Two large investigations, one goal, and such different approaches. It seems that all the experts agree that the Boeing was struck by the bug. But the question is who launched it, where from, and what modification it was. While the International Commission was trying to simulate the picture by pieces, the Russian experts had enough skills and facilities to conduct an unprecedented scale in gravity experiment for such investigation that has practically showed what had really happened to MH-17 on that fatal day. Russia – secret military training area near Nizhny Novgorod. This is the place where the book developers, the concern MH-17 that possesses an exclusive jurisdiction, has conducted an investigative experiment using the real missile and aircraft. Though the experts didn't manage to find a written-off Boeing, they used Il-86 that is similar in characteristics. And this is the book stuffed with thousands of damaged elements that fly with a speed of 2 km per second and give no chance neither to ground attack aircraft of a contender, nor to such a civilian aircraft. Among 14 million different variants of their position, the supercomputer has detected the only correct one. For the most accurate simulation, different coordinates of a possible location of the launch were considered. The village of Zaroshinskaya was the main version of the Russian experts, while the Ukrainians insisted on the place of Snezhnaya. From this point of view, the experts had to make 2 shots, and the cockpit of Il was kept for the final part of the experiment. For the beginning, they made a construction of iron shields in the form of fuselage and special catchers imitating the craft's engine, which was struck at first. The version that the missile was launched from Zaroshinskaya was confirmed. The left part of the craft, cockpit and the left engine were damaged, as well as in the case of the Malaysian Boeing. The second missile was exploded as if it was launched from Snezhnaya, and this time there was a real craft use. In this case the damages were radically different from those found on the crashed Boeing. The damaged elements didn't strike the left engine at all. But the main thing was that the holes didn't match those on the fuselage skin. That means that the Netherlands Commission report conclusions were completely contradicted. There are elements that have been cut off the IL's body. One can see specific holes that look like a butterfly. These are the holes that should be found on the Boeing's fuselage, but they are different. Therefore, all the claims to Russia and the Donbass members of People's Volunteer Corps turned out to be unreasonable. Since the holes on the Boeing skin are parallelepiped-like and they are similar to those that were used in the previous generation of the Buk missiles. The last missile of that type was produced in the times of the Soviet Union in 1986, and by the year 2011 there had been none of them used by the Russian army. They were all utilized. I'm a military-educated man, and it's impossible for me to imagine that an officer or a surgeon decided to use those old missiles. I explain my ideas. The missiles of such an old age happen to detonate themselves. Very seldom, but it does happen. Sometimes they detonate right on the unit. Just imagine, MH-17 was so interested in the truth that went to unprecedented measures, and as soon as possible it made the secret documents of the book and the secret training areas open for the representatives of NATO. We proposed them to visit the territory of the concern or any other place in Russia if there were doubts in accuracy or reliability of the first experiment results, to get acquainted with the simulation course. We were ready to give them both methods and program of the experiments, and in other words, they would be supplied with all the technical documentation, but they confined themselves with just gratefulness and nothing more. As a result, the International Commission turned out to be interested neither Russian results nor follow-up examination. I declare under my sole responsibility that the Russian Commission absolutely disagree with the conclusions in the final report. They are fundamentally wrong. It seems that instead of a successive analysis, the Commission was trying to fit evidences to the predetermined version. The Russian experts' data in the Netherlands report were completely misrepresented and taken out of context. For example, open the page number 146. This is the most questionable part dedicated to a possible place of the missile launch. The report's authors, no doubt, hinted that at that moment there were pro-Russian militia groups and that it was confirmed by the Russian specialist. Here it is, written above the square, according to the calculations of MH-17. But as a matter of fact, nobody made such calculations, and if to correlate a place of launch and those who were there, then the simulations made in Russia indirectly indicates that it was done by the Ukrainian power structures. In contrast to the Netherlands Commission, which has escaped with idle talks but not with calculations, analysis and experiments, MH-17 rests upon particular physical and chemical analysis, mathematical calculations and simulations. The experts showed what the formulas and simulations showed. The missile flew up from the southern side to the aircraft. It means that it was launched from the Ukrainian side, but the Commission said nothing of it. Another evidence of the Kyiv's army responsibility for the tragedy could be requested from the Donbas militia forces, the Ministry of Defense of the Donbas People's Republic. At least one can make sure if they do have combat zones map of the Ukrainian armed forces. There are the Buk missile launch sites. This document is a direct evidence that proves guilt of the Ukrainian army in striking the Malaysian Boeing. The Russian Duma has called the Netherlands report a political impudence, and the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov, in his report to the parliament, brought to notice that so-called investigation was completely closed from the public and made in violations of the international laws. In July last year, there was a resolution adopted that required an impartial investigation. According to the international standards, there should be the International Civil Aviation Organization engaged at the highest level, and not in the way it is engaged now. The resolution also required the United Nations Security Council to be regularly informed how the investigation was going. It also hasn't been done. I don't know why. We mentioned it many times. We proposed to send the UN Security Council mission to the area of the crash. Our Western partners refused it as well. By the way, on the day of the report, Amsterdam suddenly got in touch and categorically demanded a phone conversation with Lavrov in order to blame Moscow in making mess about the investigation. But a little thought will show us that the Netherlands did it themselves. But the most absurd thing was that Russia was appealed for cooperation with the inquiry and participating in a more serious criminal investigation of the Malaysian Boeing crash. But there was craftiness. The Russians do appeal all the way to engage their experts in the international investigation on equal terms, since everyone tries to blame them for the Boeing's crash. Otherwise, why did they make all that experiments and simulations?